There are two types of standard. One is a current standard and other one is a basic standard. What is current standard? It is an established for the use over a diminutive period of time and is related to a current circumstances. That means whatever the present situation are there, then on the basis of that the standard has been designed. Such a standard remains in operation for a limited period because of the situation is also may be changed. So on that basis and on that considerations, the amount of current standards has been designed. These standards are revised at always in the regular intervals. Current standards are three types like ideal standards, expected standards and the nominal and normal standards. Basic standards. This is a standard which is established for use unlettered for an indefinite time. It means that it is similar to an index number against which all results are measured. Variances from basic standard show trends of a deviation of the actual cost. It means the amount of actual cost has been observed and the variances would be given a trends on the basis of a certain criteria. However, basic standards are of no practical utility from the point of view of cost control and cost ascertainment. Next is setting the standard, that is the fourth part. The process of setting the standard is a valuable activity itself. The success of standard costing system depends on the reliability, accuracy and acceptance of standard. That means there are three important things. One, the standard should be reliable, there should be accurate. That means if it is reliable and accurate, then automatically you can understand that their acceptance would be identified. So if standards have been properly set and maintained, they are sound basis for determining a cost for all the different purposes. While setting the standards, the certain points to be taken into consideration, and then the use standards, reasonable standards of performance and level of activity can be identified. So these are the preliminaries of establishment of the standard cost system. Now we are going to see the few differences of this chapter. Let's begin with the first differences, that is historical cost and standard cost. As historical cost and standard cost is a basic pillar of this particular chapter. Here, what is historical cost? Historical cost is actually incurred actual cost, where the standard costs are a predetermined cost. In case of historical cost, it is only informs the total cost of a production or services, as the services is not to be considered, but the total cost of production and services. In case of a standard cost, its functions is to evaluate a managerial performance and deficiencies. Another point of historical cost is that is ascertained after they have been incurred, and therefore it actually experienced cost of a decision previously made, where the standard costs are anticipated costs which tend to state what the cost of production should be incurred. In the case of historical cost, it is related to past, and the standard cost is related to future. And one more point, it cannot do the role of planning and budgeting, but here in the standard cost, budgets are prepared on the basis of a standard cost. Another difference is standard cost and estimated cost. Standard cost aims at what the cost should be, where the estimated cost is an assessment of will-be. In case of standard cost, a planned cost which is determined on a scientific basis after taking into account a certain level of efficiency, where it is in an estimated cost, it is based on the average of past figures taking into consideration anticipated charges in the future. Here it lays emphasize on cost control, on setting the target against which actual performance is measured, and if need be, corrective measurements and steps to be taken. Here in the estimated cost are used by the undertaking for fixing a selling price of the product. Next is standard cost and budgetary cost. Standard costing is intensive in application as it calls for a detailed analysis variances, wherein the budgetary cost control is an extensive in nature and intensity of an analysis tends to match less than its standard costing. That means the standard cost is actually try to manage the variance analysis and they were actually try to apply it on that basis, but the budgetary cost is just try to match the standard costing according to the requirement. Standard cost represent a realistic yardstick and therefore more useful for controlling and reducing cost, where the budgets usually represents an upper limit on spending without considering the effectiveness of the expenditure in terms of output. Standard cost is a projection of cost account, where the budget is a projection of a financial account. Standard costs are developed mainly for the manufacturing and sometimes also for our marketing and other activities, where budgets are compiled for different functions of the business such as sales, purchase, cost and other part of production activity. Let's move to another difference, that is cost center and profit center. Cost center means a cost center may be a location, person or item of equipment for which the cost center may be ascertained and used for the purpose of cost control. Here in the profit center is the cost center which shows a profit only. Another difference is cost center is necessary for fixing a responsibility for unfavorable variances, where the profit center does not show for fixing responsibility for unfavorable variances. So this is what all about the different differences for standard costing. After the standard costing, we need to target the very important relevance of this technique, that is variance analysis. It means that we need to understand the standard costing is only a technique to understand deviations between the variables, and that deviation of the variables is considered as a variances. Here the variances means the deviation of the actual cost or actual sales from the standard cost or a profit or a sales. It means that the calculation of variances is the main object of standard costing. That is what I want to tell you here. So standard costing is actually a use of technique to find out the deviation of a variables, and that deviations has been determined an outcome in the variances. This calculation shows whether the costs are under control or not. It means that the variances may be favorable or unfavorable, that is adverse situation. Definition has been given by CIMA London, that is the process of computing the amount of variances and isolate the causes of variances between actual and standard. So this definition shows everything, the differences between the actual and standard, the deviation, it's called the variances. When actual cost is less than the standard cost, listen very carefully, in case of the actual cost is less than the standard cost, or profit is better than the standard profit, and it is known as favorable variances. That means the actual cost is unfavorable against your standard, and that's why it is a favorable variances. But in case of the actual cost is more than the standard cost or a profit, it is better than the standard profit, which is unfavorable variances, and it's called adverse situation. A mere knowledge of the variances is not sufficient and useful to the management. The causes responsible for these variances actually would also be brought into the knowledge for the management of the business. And that's why the process of finding out these causes of the variances and evaluating their effect is regard that analysis of variances. And that's why it's considered that whatever the causes we find out, whether it is in a favorable or an unfavorable, or it is in situation that the amount of deviations for a better understand and decision making for the organization, it's called analysis of variances. Now moving to the next point, that is importance of variances. It is a lot importance of analysis of variances because without analysis of variances there is no use of standard costing. That one is check and control of wastages is possible. So if in case of it is possible to control your wastages, try to control. First check and then control. It improves the efficiency of the organization by the use of this technique. That means if you find out the operational efficiency, if you find out the employees efficiency, if you find out the materiality efficiency, then this particular technique, that means the standard costing technique, is very much useful. It exercises control over all cost centers, including different departments, different activities, individuals, and many more. Responsibility of a particular person or department can be fixed. That means you can identify your responsibility, you can design a task, and on the basis of person as well as the department can be fixed. And the prediction of a production cost and sales and other activity can be analyzed, which would be very much useful. On the basis of variance analysis, delegation of authority could be made more and more effective. Variance analysis is easy to introduce, apply, and orient result also. That means it introduce very easily, it could be apply also easily, and orient to the people also very easily. Various operations efficiency also can be measured through the variance analysis. So this is what all about the importance of variances. Now see here, the next point is types of variances. This is now a real part of the variance analysis. Here, initially the standards for all elements of cost like a material, labor and overheads should be set, and then the actual cost should be compared with the standards cost to obtain the different variances. Some deviations are found when actual performance are recorded and compared with the standard set. These deviations are known as variances. As per the CIMA London, a variances is the difference between the standard cost and the comparable actual cost incurred during the period of time. So now this is according to the definition of the standard cost. Variances are classified on the basis of one, controllable variances and uncontrollable variances. On the basis of profitability, with regard to the profitability or effect, variances may be classified in a favorable variances or an unfavorable variances. And on the basis of elements of cost, through the different type of variances, it can be calculated. Their use may not be much useful, and they calculated on the basis of a different units of a cost. There are material variances, labor variances, and overhead variances. Here we are going to discuss all elements of cost variances one by one. Start with the material variances. There are 5 variances under this head. Let's begin with the first, material cost variances.